Happy anniversary, 2 years, outstanding.
Congratulations to you and the Joyful Friar Podcast team on your second anniversary. Who knew when you first started this that 2 years later you'd still be running strong and gaining so much momentum? I'm very proud of you and happy for you. You're doing great work in the world.
I have enjoyed the episodes immensely. I love Father Nathan's speakers. I like that I can hear it on my phone, on the way to work, at my lunch break at work. I love that they're on YouTube so that when I want to tell my friends about an episode that might be particularly helpful in their life or a situation they're dealing with, I can refer them to YouTube and they can be enlightened maybe by something he said on the podcast.
Well, welcome to this edition of The Joyful Friar. My name is Dana Taylor, and I have been asked to be the guest host of this very special edition. You may notice behind me it says, Happy Anniversary. And that's because this is the second anniversary of Father Nathan Castle's podcast, Joyful Friar. Now, you may ask, now, why is she the guest host? Well, let me tell you a little story before I say and introduce Father Castle. About 5 years ago, 2018, I was at a church gathering in Hawaii, the Unity Church of Hawaii. And I didn't know very many people there, but I was chatting with a man. In my memory, he's about 10 feet tall. I don't know how tall David was, but he was very tall. And we had nothing in common. We had never met before, and I never had another conversation with him. But he said to me, I am reading the most fascinating book. I said, really? What is it? And he said, it's called Afterlife Interrupted by Father Nathan Castle, a Catholic priest. And he helps souls cross to the other side. I said, oh my gosh, that does sound fascinating. And I'm always on the lookout for something that's really interesting to put in my blog site, which is called Supernal Living. Little plug there. So I went home and I downloaded it and listened to the audio version. And I was just really blown away about the work that Father Castle does and the fact that he is a Catholic priest out there doing this for all the world to see. I thought that was wonderful and encouraging to see a combination of spirituality and Christian faith being presented to the world. So fast forward about 5 years later to 2024, and I'm now very active with an organization called Spiritual Awakenings International. And we were going to be having a conference in June of 2024. And lo and behold, Father Nathan Castle is one of our very special guests. And I didn't say anything about it to the president, and she just assigned me to be the host for his segment. And I was very excited because by then I'm kind of a fangirl, Father Nathan Castle. And I went ahead and downloaded what it turned out to be. There's more books in the Afterlife Interrupted series that I didn't know at the time. So I read it and I was excited to say hello and welcome. And then it turned out that we had more than just a hello and goodbye, that we ended up having really a wonderful conversation. Mm-hmm. And so that is why I am the guest host here today to celebrate the second anniversary of the Joyful Friar. And so now, without much ado, welcome to your own show.
Well, thanks.
Nathan Castle.
I'm remembering that interview well, and I'm, in addition to having this podcast, I'm a guest on many other people's podcasts. It's so unlikely. I hardly listened to podcasts before I had one. I would never have put myself forward as someone who would have a podcast, but here we go. We're almost in starting, year 3. But in that, I'm used to conversational presentations, and I find them more engaging than just something that seems like more straight lecture. So right. When I think I spoke for about half the time until I said, Dana, would you mind just asking me a thing or two, or let's talk back and forth, and it had a really nice quality about it.
Well, it was just for me, like I said, it was like, oh, because I actually now that I'm doing this, I've got a whole notebook of questions because I've been sitting on questions. I think the first question, though, people would like to know is, at least I would, this is the anniversary of the Joyful Friar. What was the nudge to start doing a podcast on top of the other work that you're doing about these things?
To me, it goes back. I'm a Catholic Christian, and the last scene in the Gospel of Matthew is the crucified and risen Christ it says he takes the 11 up a high mountain, because Matthew is trying to speak to a Jewish audience about Jesus, and he makes him look as much like Moses as he can. He's always drawing parallels between Moses and Jesus. And of course, the high mountain was the place of encounter in the covenant. And
Right.
so anyway, there are 11 of them, which is a device. I mean, Judas is off the scene, but the author was clever to put the number 11 in there because it suggests incompletion. You don't go to the store for 11 eggs, or buy 11 donuts.
Right.
And in football, there's the 12th man tradition, the people in the stands being another team member. So Jesus is drawing anybody who was paying attention up this high mountain and saying, go out to all the world and tell the good news. And the good news is
Right.
that
The Great Commission.
the Great Commission, it's death is survivable, and I'm here to prove it.
Mhm.
Hello,
Mhm.
I died 3 days ago, but here I am. And go out to all the world and tell the good news. And I discovered a few years ago that even after having been in church life my entire 68 years, a lot of church folk are less than fully convinced that they will survive their death.
Oh, absolutely.
I do a forced choice little device when I'm in front of groups as a speaker, and I ask them to close their eyes, and I explain what I'm doing, and I'm going to count down from 10 to 0, 10 being strongest, 0 being weakest. Where do you tell yourself the truth? Where do you land on this question about your own mortality and the question of whether you will still be you after you die? And I ask them to raise their hand only once when I call out the right number. And when I call out the 10, I usually get about a quarter of the room. And very often, if there's a pastor in the room, they're usually not raising their hand. They're usually
That's sad.
they're usually nines. And sometimes they'll say to me afterwards, well, God is inscrutable. And as much as you know God, there's always a quality around God that you don't know. And so sometimes they feel like they need to not be rock solid sure and say 9 is the better number. But when I get down to about 7, about half of the room, or maybe 60%, have raised their hand by then. But that leaves about 40% who are 6 or below. And then it's very common that the person who came early to start the coffee or has the keys to the church or whatever, and who's very well known there, might be a 2 or a 3 on that question.
Kind of afraid of what they might see on the other side too. It's not.
There's just a lot of, and everyone, I'm only asking not because I want to judge anyone. I just want to know where's your heart, and how are you living out the span of years that you have, and we don't know how many we have. It's always the X factor. We don't know how long we'll be here. So you can't, I'm 68, but 68 into what? Like what percentage of my life upon the earth have I used yet? I don't know.
Right. Well, I know. I feel things are ticking away pretty fast. So trying to make the most of it.
And then sometimes as people get older, one thing that can happen is people will say things that sound like this. Dana, what did you used to do when you were useful?
Right.
They'll talk about your retirement, like your best years are behind you.
Right.
And then there can be physical stuff that makes you sometimes feel like the best I can hope for tomorrow is not to be much more decrepit than I am today.
Right. I'm really seeing that with my friends.
And
well,
so,
let me
Yeah.
So this was a way for you to continue in a new medium
Yes,
to a
beyond
certain
writing,
degree.
because I
Hmm.
had, I had written books, and then I created the audiobooks so that people could listen to them. And I was just scanning around for how else can I communicate to people. And someone said to me, I worked with Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
uh, and was a client. I went to some retreats that he offered, and his assistant, Patty Aubrey, said to me, "You really should start a podcast." And what I heard is, "You really should colonize the moon." That that
What?
uh, I didn't even listen to podcasts, barely, and I did I wasn't quite sure how to find them, and I knew
Right.
there's a little icon on the bottom of my computer that has a little microphone, but anyway, but he
Magical.
suggested,
So here you are,
oh yeah,
2 years in and starting the third.
yeah,
All right. Well, can we move on to some of my
absolutely,
questions?
you're in charge
All
of
right.
this.
I'm in charge.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I asked Spirit to say, well, what I'm going to ask, I got topics
Okay,
of questions.
all right,
And I just sort of randomly came down with them. I won't show you my notes because they're kind of a mess. But so the first topic that I came through to me was the dreams,
uh-huh,
dealing with the dreams. And just question number one, when I told a friend of mine what you do, her reaction when I thought about this was like, well, especially in the beginning when you had these dreams that were of violence or tragedy or something, and here you are sleeping peacefully, and then all of a sudden you have this dream. How disturbing is that? Can you get back to sleep? Was it haunting to you at first, or could you just kind of get up and get with it and know that there was really a difference between your dreams and that this was coming from another source?
there was never gratuitous violence in them. They would describe a car crash such that I understood what happened, but it wasn't gory. Um,
Mhm.
I don't go to slasher movies. I don't want a lot of blood and gore in my imagination. So I always felt that they were buffered. I was given entree into a scene that included violence that might have been fatal, but it wasn't gratuitous.
Okay. And then are you the experiencer or are you an observer or is it kind of been both things?
I learned that, I'm a storyteller, and as both as a preacher and a writer, and these people are all telling a story. And so storytellers can tell their stories from lots of different points of view. For example, car crashes are very common in my dreamscapes, but you can put me behind the wheel, you can put me in the passenger seat, you can put me on a sidewalk next to the road, you can have me hover over something like a drone might. Um, there's a lot of ways that you can convey what happened, but it kind of depends on point of view as a storyteller.
So some of it is depending upon the soul who's telling you the story, is
A
what I'm
lot of it
hearing
is.
here.
A lot of it is, yes.
Interesting. Interesting. Because they're entering your consciousness
But they're
with a
telling
story
their
to tell.
story, and they're the one choosing how to craft it.
Interesting. Well, I hadn't should it that. I mean, I get it now after reading all your books. I say, oh, of course, that's the way it is. They're like, I'm okay. So here's another question coming to me. These people have been like guided to you
They have,
to be to tell the story. Do you
correct.
have a sense of that process at all? I mean, that seems to be pretty mysterious in the books for me.
Well, I've had like 600. So with that many, there begins to be patterns and, expectations and stuff. Um, well, I used to ask early on, how did you find me? And the answer I kept getting was, I don't know, someone brought me here. One time someone said, your light was on. Um, uh, After a while, I just quit asking because it didn't seem that important. The fact that we're together is all that really matters. What was important is they're all vetted. Nothing is random about it. And I believe my prayer partners and I are at the tail end of a therapeutic uh, initial level for people that needed it because their dying was so uh, abrupt, violent, traumatic. That's almost always the case. Once in a while, it's people that had a trauma from which they didn't heal and kind of brought it with them when they died because they still need
Right.
healing from it. But
Right.
most of the time, it's traumatic death, and they've been through a process where there might have been something on the order of a emergency responder that, like their guardian
Mhm.
angel, that was there at the time of the car crash and got them
Right.
out of the body and helped them to another place. And then it has some sort of sequence analogous to the way our medical system operates with an emergency room and not
Triage. Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Hmm.
And then step down rooms, maybe intensive care, all the way out to the discharge staff that is helping you gather yourself to leave because you don't need to be here anymore. That's really where we operate.
Right. You're part of the distress. Yeah. You're
Yes.
part of the, like
We
the
very
social worker who
rarely
comes in
do.
at the
They've
end,
all
kind
been
of.
through some sort of counseling
Yeah.
to help them reshape their thinking and to appropriately acclimate to their new circumstance. That
Mhm.
however you died, you died. Can we just agree on that? And
And let's keep going.
let's keep going.
This is the beginning. Okay, so let's kind of segue into my next area, which are the guardians, the guardian angels.
Yes.
Um, and let's see, what was these brilliant questions that I had? Yes. So how has your idea about guardian angels expanded through the years?
I was taught about them as a child, and I was taught that I had one that was unique to me, that was assigned to me as my special companion, who would always be with me through my whole life and would always love me and look out for me. So that was an article of faith that I had from maybe about 5 years old. I had there's a kind of a very common iconic drawing that Christian children might have seen of some children on a rickety footbridge
Bridge. Mhm. Yeah.
with a creek under it that they could fall into and drown. But there's this huge guardian angel hovering over them, and I had one of those over my bed
Right. I did too.
as a child. So, but over the years, I got to know the name of my guardian and engage. He's not, and they're not gendered beings by their nature, but when they interact with us, they choose one because it's most normal for us. We're used to
Mhm.
talking to a man or a woman, um, and so they'll present as more one than another. And mine, Philip James with the line of Michael is his name. And when he does choose to speak, which isn't very often, it's delightful to me. And he's always what they're very interested in the truth. They always want to guide you to truth. And in Christian language, Jesus once refers to himself as the way, the truth, and the life.
The life.
And
Yeah.
so sometimes when I'm confounded about something or confused in my thinking, sometimes I'll call Jesus by the name truth. And I'll say, hey, truth, come sit by me. I, I need to understand the truth of a thing so that I can act rightly or think rightly. So anyway, my guardian is very beloved to me and always part of my day.
Now, the guardians that come through have got, it seems like very different personalities, different energies.
Yes.
Do you want to share about some of the, I don't know, more unique ones that is kind of stick in your mind?
Um, Well, one thing they've begun doing in recent years, I've been at this work about 27 years, although I only wrote the first of the Afterlife Interrupted books in 2018, so that's now 6 years ago. But I was doing this quietly while I was a pastor and a campus minister and stuff. I just thought it might be too strange and freak people out and get in the way of my day job. But
Exactly. I know that one very well.
okay, a lot of people that
You
have
want to see normal. I spent 30 years in the Bible Belt, so I
okay.
had to be on the down low for the work
And
that I
and
did.
that goes across religious denominations and schemas.
Mhm.
When I'm at an IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies meeting, some of those people don't have any formal religious affiliation of any kind, but they have families and coworkers and some sort of network. And most of us have some feeling of mixed safety. There are
Right.
places where it's safe for us to talk about these things and other places where it's not, where they just rather it didn't come up. So I'm used to that.
Right.
But I digress. You asked me a question that I didn't.
Yes, about the angels.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there ones that kind of really were unique, stick with you?
Yeah. Well, one thing in general, as they're persons, they're angelic persons in the classic Catholic schema. There are divine persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There are angelic persons, and then there are human persons. And then in recent years, there's been more of a questioning about, is there animal personhood, and do other living things like plants, do they have consciousness and so on? But classically, it's divine persons, angelic persons, human persons, and the angels have personalities. And so some of them are quite serious in the way that they conduct their business, and others are very carefree and giddy. They're all happy when they come, especially not just in the dream, but in the session where I go get with a prayer partner and we help someone cross. They've waited for this day for a long time, and it's like graduation day.
I was going to say, to me, it's like you're helping them graduate. That's the word every time I'm reading.
Yeah, not
They're
too long ago,
graduating.
somebody compared it to their kindergarten graduation. He said, I remember being dressed up in a little cap and gown as a 5-year-old, and I hadn't acquired any degree. And he said, I feel like that today because they're celebrating me, and I don't feel like I've done anything to earn it. But it's happy, and I'm moving on. And so anyway, that's one of the ways that the angels can be very they all love you, and but they can be very like extroverted about it or introverted. They have their own personalities.
Well, the question that comes from a lot of people to you is, how do you have ways of helping people get in touch with their own guardian angels?
I do. And in fact, today I owe my assistant another podcast. You know, we have a podcast that drops every Tuesday, but the one that drops next week I haven't recorded yet, and it's going to include a guided meditation that can dispose a person to the possibility of welcoming their guardian angel in a way that in spirit they might be able to perceive them.
Okay. Well, I know, I guess I'm going to digress a little bit to say the book about asking for the most benevolent outcomes. I don't know if you've read that book. And he posits that your guardian angel wants to jump in, but you've got to ask.
You do. And it's a relationship. And like any relationship, it needs to be cultivated and kept up. And so that means
not just ask for in emergencies, but a daily relationship.
yes, and one that's trusting and consultative. For example, you can ask your guardian to enter into your thought processes. They cannot. It's rude for them to read your mind. You're entitled to your own thoughts, and those can be private. But you can say to your guardian, would you please enter into my consciousness and into my thinking and be with me in it and contribute in any way that you can to a way that I move through what I'm thinking about.
I mean, I spend a lot of time with my meditation, but you're right. There's a relationship that you start building and moving into, and communication is relationship.
And you said something just as we were coming on, starting the show, that you had been praying in the spirit for questions to ask me, and you felt like you were given a lot of answers.
Right, exactly. I was like, thanks, because I thought it would take me a couple hours. It took me about 15 minutes.
That's the process. You just it does involve quietude, but it doesn't have to be spooky. You don't have to create some sort of I don't know, odd space. It's just for any of us that have a spiritual practice that we might call prayer, there needs to be a place and a time that's dedicated. It means turning the phone off, turning the TV off, Then Jesus once said, "Go to your room and close the door and speak to your heavenly Father in secret." There's nothing esoteric about it. It's just a matter of focus and taking some other stimuli and setting them aside for a while you do this.
Practice and a discipline.
Yeah.
Let's move on to this next topic that I want to jump into, and that is the afterlife.
Yes.
As I recall in our first conversation, and I love the analogy that you gave, was that as a child, you kind of thought of the continent, the countries,
Yes.
that there was three parts: Canada, where people went up like to heaven, and then Mexico. I hate to say Mexico was hell, but I think that's what your analogy was. South of the border, anyway. Let's not call it a particular
Well,
country.
I mixed them up so that I'm not demonizing any one of those countries.
Right. We're not going to that. Let's just say south or something. And then, but the middle part was where most of the people were, and you were helping people who were kind of there to move on later on. But how has your ideas about the afterlife changed through the years?
Well, even as a little child, when I was being taught those fixed places, heaven, hell, and purgatory, even then, it seemed to me that there might be something like a boundary, but not every boundary is like barbed wire or a brick wall. There are some that are semi-permeable, watercolors rather than stained glass,
Okay.
where things can both belong but blur or overlap. And love is like that. You're still you and not that other person, but loving that other person makes you sort of, I don't know, move into them and they into you. I'm sort of merging. Anyway, I'm interested in quantum physics, and I don't know very much about it, but there are a lot of spiritual people that look to some of the advances in quantum physics that say to us that everything is energy and that our bodies are energetic. I remember being in a third grade classroom and learning that, or being told that our bodies were 3/4 water, and we all objected because that just seemed preposterous.
Yeah.
Where they're quite clearly solid. Yes, it's true we have blood, but that doesn't mean we're 3/4 water. Well, in fact, that's true. We are. So states of matter I used to think of, in the pre-existing physics were, a solid, a liquid, a vapor, but then we know now that all of states of matter are really energy behaving in
So
different ways.
we're all just light buzzing.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so that when we leave the body, where energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transferred, and so we leave the physics of this body, but we immediately have some sort of other form because we have to. There has to be a way of being, and then I've seen how people adapt to that as they can wrap their head around it.
Right. Well, it seems from reading your book that we're told Wayne Dyer 101, we're creating our own reality, but it really seems like it on the other side that you present that you think it, you create it, very, very strongly there from what I'm, because I'm just so fascinated by your presentation of the afterlife in your books.
Some of that, yeah. Sometimes I think people are good at, remember, my little population was all traumatized. So we're not dealing with the broad spectrum of everybody that dies today. So that's important to keep in mind. But even within that population, there are some who are quicker to adapt. I'm thinking of, in the most recent book, Tony and the Floating Anthonys. He was about a 23-year-old at the time of his death, and he left his body abruptly in a car crash. But his guardian said to him, "Come sit. Do you understand that you're over here by me and your body's over there? It carried you through many things, but it couldn't carry you through that. But do you understand that you're over here with me and you're safe?" And he said, "Well, when you put it like that, yeah, I have to." And then he calls his guardian Tinkerbell.
That's
And
right. That's right. I've read it, but I'm like, I gotta get my head in the
I just
game
love
for
that
the
story
Anthony's. Yeah.
because even within minutes after his death, he was being spoken to. He said Tinkerbell was like not like your mom, but like some aunt or some authoritative woman school teacher or businesswoman or somebody that
Hmm.
you ought to listen to. And he said, I listened, and she said, do you understand that you're here and you're safe? Yes. All right. We can stay here as long as you like, but as soon as you say the word, I'll take you someplace better. And he said, essentially, let's see, I'm inside a chemical refinery, sitting next to a road,
That's right.
next to the crash that killed me. I could stay here as long as I want to. He said,
Let's go.
why would I want to? But let's go somewhere else. And so he got with the program really early and quickly.
Hmm.
And it seems to me that people that are able to do that, not everyone is, fare better.
Hmm. Well,
Sometimes,
some of the fun ways, like the lady who was her sister showed up with the airplane, and she's the little
yeah, Celie,
stewardess.
Claire and
That's so
Celie's the
cute.
stewardess. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Her sister, she said,
Hmm.
my sister died 40 years ago, and I've been talking to her photograph ever since. If she could come to me, I'd love to see her. So, and then when she was in a stewardess outfit and had an umbrella drink. And she said she always wanted to be a stewardess, but never got to do it. So it's just girls having a little fun.
Right, right. So you can manifest what what you want. Obviously, there's got to be limits to everything because there are limits. I mean, they say, here we can be anything we want to be. Well, yes and no.
And what the fact that you manifest something doesn't mean you have to stay that. You can go to a costume party, come home and take the costume off. You don't have to stay a pirate.
Right,
You can be
right.
whatever. You can be whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. I think the main point of your books is that there is an afterlife.
Absolutely. I'm
Hmm.
rock solid sure of that.
Hmm. All right. Well, let's see. What else do I have in my brilliant questions here? The helpers. Okay. We've got these helpers who come because you've got first typically the guardian angel.
Huh?
But then you go through this process of hearing the story and all that. And then the helper, somebody comes to help them graduate, move on. And I want to talk about them a little bit. But I guess one of my first questions is in my mind, with not reading your book, I would have thought that just the guardian angel would have been the helper.
Well, they are. But
Mhm.
again, I was raised in a Catholic Christian home where we didn't only have that picture of the guardian angel above our heads, but we had holy pictures of Jesus or Mary or Joseph or other saints. And we also were learning in the Catholic communion of the saints about people being the patron of something, like Saint Isidore the farmer being the patron of farmers, or uh,
Yeah.
a school teacher who's the patron of school teachers, and so on. That people can love a thing and develop that love and turn it into an act of service during their human life, and after they die, that doesn't just disappear. It finds another way to be expressed.
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of people who are either first, I'm talking about here on Earth, either first responders of some kind, police, firemen, ambulance folk, EMTs. Then there are nurses that train just to be ER nurses. They don't
Mhm.
want to be in the maternity. They want to be in the ER. There are
Right.
specializations where people really feel engaged and empowered and joyful about doing something, even if it's something hard uh, that most of us would not want anything to do with. Isn't that marvelous, the way that there are people that want to do things that you would absolutely hate to do?
I know. I mean, I'm amazed. I mean, that just about everything that everybody does or has the guts to do. I would be like, I'm too scared to do that.
I remember
So
learning about that in little
yeah.
children's picture books that often had some sort of a like European village where there would be a baker um, next door to I don't know, the barber or the policeman or whatever, that there were these different occupations that you might choose to live, and each of them contributed something to the common good. Well, anyway,
Right.
the helpers are both humans who have died, so call them souls if you like. There's
Right.
some who are angels who they work together, and on this lower therapeutic level where the people that I've been asked to serve are for a time, it's really organized, and it brings them from the traumatic death through whatever process they need to the discharge staff, my prayer partners.
Right. There's so much order in the afterlife as you present it.
Yes.
It's very interesting. And some of the helpers, of course, I think a lot of people, when they think about passing, they think about, am I going to see my loved ones again?
Yes.
And sometimes the helpers are the special, generally relatives.
They are. And then that can depend, because sometimes people are frightened at the eye, or don't want to see some relative that treated them poorly or whatever.
Right.
All of these things can be worked out over time and eternity. But well, early on, I started seeing that one of the ways that they get people re-engaged, sometimes they die very discouraged and angry that they died, or felt so ripped away. That's why I use the word interrupted, because it has rupture in it.
Right.
That's the root of that word. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people feel really cheated and deprived and angry, and they need to work through that to some sort of peace about, okay, well, all that's understandable. But one guy, Hal, at the end of book one, he died because he didn't fasten his seatbelt. In those years in the 70s, when there were all those public services announcements about buckle up for safety, buckle up. And
Right.
he didn't do it. And if he had, he probably would have survived the accident that caused his death. And he was sort of kicking himself in the afterlife. Damn it, I should have just buckled an ankle. And he didn't. And eventually his guardian said to him, buddy, do you want to be unhappy for all eternity? And that really stopped him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, nobody's ever put it to me quite like that. And he said, you make yourself unhappy every time you remind yourself and blame yourself that if only you'd done that thing, you would have. He said, you know what that makes you feel like, and you know where it brings you, which is nowhere. It brings you in circles. You can stay that way if you want to. Would you like to be eternally unhappy? And he said, wow, that putting it to me that way really caused me to say, no, I don't. How do I change? And then he was ready for some movement because he was willing.
And that's really the essence of so many of your stories, is a change of thinking.
And that's here and hereafter. I mean, much of the work of a preacher is helping people today in this moment imagine how the Holy Spirit might be encouraging them to grow and move and expand, evolve, however you want to think of it.
Right.
But oftentimes that means a willingness to turn loose of some cherished notion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Right. Or some grudge.
Or grudge, or
mhm.
or just way of looking at my life that is limiting in a way that it is unnecessary, but it's what I do.
Right. One of my favorite helpers that you had was Margaret Hamilton.
Yeah.
And you've had a lot of famous people step in as helpers.
Yes. I haven't made a big deal of that, but when I was a child, and I grew up in front of the TV. You know, we were five kids, and it was a busy household, and there were 3 channels on TV, and the TV was really the heart of the home more than the table.
Me too. We used to eat, set the TV tray up, put the food in.
I had a loving
see what
home,
was
but it was rare when the television was turned off. And so I learned about pop culture figures, whoever was on TV or in the news or whatever. And one of the things that I learned early on that was kind of supported in the scriptures was the idea of the poor little rich man. You know, the fact that people had fame and fortune. Very often we were hearing about their divorces, their tumultuous love lives and lawsuits, and the fact that somebody was, famous for being in movies or TV or something else didn't necessarily mean they were happy, even if they were always pictured as smiling. And then the scriptures also, Jesus will say something like it's hard for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. So I started praying early on for celebrities when I learned that they were unhappy because
Wow.
it's in the paper. It's or if you even if you never bought a tab.
You read as a little boy. I mean, you were reading the obits and praying for
I
people.
was doing that, but
Yeah,
I also was
praying
sitting
for the
somewhere to
celebs.
get a
Yeah,
carton of milk, and I was waiting in the line where they have the gum and the mints and the tabloids,
right.
and the
And
headlines
there
just
was
reading
Jackie Onassis right there every
all,
week,
all the
and
time.
Liz.
Yes, or
Yeah.
Elvis with all his
Hmm.
drug problems, or whatever.
Yeah.
There were the fact that you were famous and rich and that people admired you didn't mean that you had a happy life. And so I
Hmm.
was praying for celebrities a long time ago that they would be happy, that they would be at peace, that whatever. And then I explained that when they show up, they do the same thing here. I'm on the campus of the University of Arizona, and we have a local football bowl game between Christmas and New Year's. And whenever the out of town teams come to Tucson to play a football game, they show them on TV visiting in a children's hospital.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
a very and these people are
Right.
not huge celebrities. They just play for a university's football team,
Right.
and but they come in uniform to a little kid's sickbed to boost them because
Right.
it makes them feel important. And
It does make you feel special. I mean, if you're on the other side and you're feeling pretty humble about, or anywhere in hospital, and somebody who's got a little bit of fame, even just a little bit, comes and takes the time for you, that makes you feel more special.
yes, and so when that first started happening a long while ago, there's a certain excitement about that, but it's really our job to stay on task and not to be I don't know, starstruck or anything like that. So when a celebrity shows up, we just greet them and say, "We're so happy that you're here," and then we stay on our task.
Let's circle back real quick to Margaret Hamilton
Yes.
coming in as a helper.
Yeah. When my first book is on the Wizard of Oz. You can see it on the wall behind me, but there's
Mhm.
I love the Wizard of Oz story, and it was very pivotal in my childhood. And then when I wrote this book in 2011. Well, I was actually thinking about it for about 5 years before that. And in the course of it, I was praying to Frank Baum, the author, because I knew that I was going to go into this land that he created, and it just felt respectful to begin to have a spiritual relationship with him. So I started praying to him. I read about him. His son wrote a book about him. I was praying to his wife, and his mother-in-law lived with him for most of their marriage, um, Maud and Matilda, and and then I began to pray for the cast, and the way that I did that, the last shall be first and the first last. I prayed for everyone
Right.
who put a button on a costume, anyone who swept the studio floor, um, anybody that was in the credits that roll at the end. Um, so I was praying to everybody affiliated with the whole thing and telling them I'm grateful for what they did because it's had lasting impact. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
and I prayed to the actors who um, and then I started and then once when that book came out, people just every time anybody saw some artifact, they bought it for me. It wasn't just Christmas or birthday. I have a whole collection of Oz stuff all over my house. And Margaret Hamilton, when do you remember her pitching Maxwell House coffee?
Hmm.
Do you remember those ads?
Oh, yes. But I don't remember her doing the Maxwell House. Good to the last drop.
Yes, and she played this little corn pone. You know how they would have these little corner stores where everybody. I mean, we all shopped in
Hmm.
supermarkets where you might not see anybody but they even then in the 70s there was this throwback to the idea that the grocer knows you, the druggist knows you, and so on. And she
Right.
was
Well,
this
here in Boulder Creek, they do know us.
okay, well there you go. Well, she was playing some proprietress of some little grocery store, and everybody who came in was told about how all the merits of Maxwell House coffee. And so anyway, she by then was probably in her 70s, and she was a sweet elderly lady that was selling coffee. Anyway, it just turned out that, I learned about her as I read about the production of the movie and different things. And she's just a sweet soul. She was divorced early and had about a 5-year-old son, I think, at the time of the film, of the making of The Wizard of Oz. And uh, apparently just a really lovable person, somebody that nobody ever said an unkind word around.
And then she came in on that story, and I guess maybe we can circle into this about a girl B
Yes,
who had committed suicide.
yes.
And
She was in the
there was
entertainment.
a lot of grace. Yeah, there was a lot of grace, I thought, that she brought to B.
Yes, B was her name. And she was, I think, 18 when she was discovered right off the farm, uh, brought into a boy band, one of those clarinet, like Lawrence Welk, groups with an all
Right.
all
With
male
one woman
with
singer. Yeah.
one woman
Yeah.
singer. But it was probably in the 30s, and they were on trains and buses moving from place to place. And they began to house her in a hotel where they kept a key and help themselves to her in her own bed. And she, at 18, didn't know how to do anything except submit so that it would be over faster. And she becomes pregnant by God knows who. And she decided in the end that she said she took matters into her own hands, and that she would only allow her.
At that point time, that just seemed to be her only solution.
That was
I
that
remember
was
feeling so sorry for her because it really wasn't, but that's what she thought at 18.
Yes, and that's the way things played out. And in
Mhm.
the end, when we did help her move along, the person who came for her was Margaret Hamilton. And she explained that she was in the industry during that same time period. And really, our Me Too movement, how old is that now? Maybe less than 10 years?
Oh,
Um,
yeah, far less.
um, that shining the spotlight on the victimization of women in the entertainment field by men who feel entitled, um, that was quite common in the golden age of Hollywood. And and
Right.
Margaret knew that, and she said, I lived through that period, and I had the good fortune of looking like someone who could be cast as the Wicked Witch of the West. She said I was surrounded by starlets and, you know, bombshells and stuff, and I was not that. And she said my
Right.
looks probably spared me some of that unwanted male attention. Nevertheless, it was around me all the time.
Sure they did.
I can appreciate what this
Mhm.
young woman went through, and I'm here to help. And if
Yeah.
you
I
remember,
thought that was a beautiful story from so many angles.
well, do you remember that she decided that as they crossed, they were going to go on a girl date? Do you remember that? She said that
Right, they went shopping, didn't they?
just about
Yeah.
every town had at least one block or part of a block that had a posh shop or two. Some dress shop that also had a tea room or something that was very feminine, and that was a place where you could properly get dressed up with your hat and your gloves and heels and go out for a girl date. And so,
Right.
and then
Right.
B said, I never had the money to do that. And she said, but here, uh, afterwards, she told us, she said, everything here is in stock, it's in your size, it's in your color, and everything fits perfectly, and none of it costs anything. And so she was like this heaven, this dream of afterlife.
Sounds like heaven to me.
Yeah, so it was a sweet thing for a kind of farm girl that had this hard uh, life and that ended as it did, that she could just be pampered. And
Right.
Margaret Hamilton was the kind of
Right.
the
And it
older.
certainly shows a total forgiveness for taking your life.
She didn't feel the need to be forgiven. She said, I'm not
Yeah.
going to be a part of any religious shaming. She said, I took matters into my own hands. And if you need to, she was questioning me because she knew I was a priest. And she said, wouldn't your church make you do that? And I said, I'm free to do as I please, and I would never I would never shame a person. It's none of my business. It's just not.
I'm going to move on a little bit to the book club of your souls, because you allude to the fact that once you've invited some people to be in your books, they seem to create relationships on the other side.
Yes, I've called them the book people.
The book people.
There are 13 stories times 3 books, so there's total of 39 whose stories are in print. Of course, there are a great many more that have been through this process that are not in print, but I do call upon the book people. And then I just say, and for any others who've been through this process, would you like to be with us today when we're doing a new story? And yeah, and I have that. I hear once in a while that it's as though they're all in the same room. But if you gather 39 people in a room, you're not going to know everyone in the room well.
Right.
And so they can have different degrees of relationship depending upon whether they've spent time with each other.
Right. It does appear like, I remember one reading saying that he was following you and watching you. And so do you have this sense all the time that the work that you're doing is obviously not just in a vacuum, that there's a whole host of the people that you call in, the spirits that you call in to protect you, but also it appears that there's a viewing of some of the work that you're doing.
Yes, and sometimes the way they express it is that even the first guy that I helped, that my prayer person I helped, Ray, who had watched his wife for 40 years and wanted to greet her when she passed, he decided that after he was successful at receiving his wife when she died, he said, now that I know how to do that, I want to learn more about it. And so he went to a school to learn more about how to do that and to make it sort of an afterlife occupation or way of helping.
Right.
That kind of thing
And
happens.
that's another thing that your books show, is that learning just goes on and on and on.
It does. I remember Nadi, the man who was killed in Baghdad while at prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm so surprised that I was told that my religion taught me many true things, but some things it got wrong. And one of them was clannishness, and he said I was killed by the wrong kind of Muslims. I was the wrong kind of Muslim, and that's why I was killed. Other Muslims killed me because my prayers offended them. And so he said, that kind of stuff just is not true. And we're all each other's kind. So he decided that after learning some things about the way that world religions operate, he wanted to learn more about truth and how in the afterlife he could help people that had religious ideas that needed to be sifted or sorted through.
Interesting. I love what you said very early on in this broadcast, that you asked Jesus to be truth, that when
Yes.
you are confused, you use that. And I thought, oh, I need to do that, because watching the news, I get very confused about what the truth is.
In recent years, we've had people profiting more than ever on broadcasting things that they know not to be true, but they create an alternative stream of ideas or topics and things, and find a following and make money at it, or gain more clicks, or have some sort of payoff for getting people to believe what they say, even if they know.
And Jesus said, you shall know them by their fruits.
Yes, and then it's important to check our own work and not get too enamored of our own thoughts and ideas. And one of the ways that the scientific method moves forward is recognizing when some new truth has emerged that tells us what we thought the reality was before is really not that. It's one of the important things
Evolving
about
world.
Well, if in order to learn a new thing, sometimes you have to say goodbye to an old formulation of things and move on to that's part of what the afterlife work of helping when people are stuck very often is because they do have a story that they're sticking to because their mom told them, or their pastor told them, or some authority figure told them. And
Right.
well, yeah, but what if that's only partly true? And can you honor the person who said that while you also say they did the best they could? They gave me this, but not that.
Your third book that I finished recently, to me, that book had a lot of what I would call, I guess they all do, but this one especially had what I would call cautionary tales. Several people in them didn't have traumatic deaths, but they had such moments in their life that they got stuck in a way of thinking that cut them off from fully living a good life.
Yes.
And I assume that was kind of the reason why you picked those particular stories for that book in what I call cautionary tales.
You
Uh,
might be thinking of Sylvia, the woman whose husband and young child were killed. Or were you
yes,
thinking,
and also the woman who was raped
yes,
and
Helen.
couldn't get over that, and so just never could enter into relationships, couldn't tell anybody about it. And I think I saw in that woman a lot of people I know
Hmm.
that not
Yes,
necessarily rape, but they get stuck in some bad thing and can't get past it. It becomes
yes,
their total story.
right. Helen was divorced late, rather past midlife, I think, and had no idea that her marriage would ever end as it did, and had to adjust to living in a great big house by herself in a country club with a circle of friends that were used to her being Helen and him, whoever, I don't remember that. I don't know if I ever knew
Right.
a husband's name, former husband's name, but she had invited a man who she thought was a gentleman that she knew through this circle. And she didn't want to go on a date. She said she felt like it would be a little too corny, dinner and a movie, but maybe she could just invite
Yeah.
a man over for dinner in her home, and he raped her. And um, she said it was horrid. It was completely, unprovoked. And she was so shocked that it happened. Then he threatened her, and she just decided that she would never speak a word of it to anyone. And
Mhm.
and then it had, how those kind of things are, well, many things secrets that never get expressed, truths that never get told, they find their way out in odd ways. And she
Mhm.
she ended up being she wouldn't let her grandchildren stay overnight because her home was a crime scene, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, her story it just made me so sad because all these things that could have been beautiful in her life, her grandchildren, she had plenty of money, she could have done a lot of things, and she just made her world very, very small and very singular, very
And
lonely.
and sometimes on the one hand, would you say she chose that, or did she just default into it and felt optionless? Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, she became powerless over it. It was the way that she could actually have some control. I think that was her way of somehow keeping control uh, of her life, but it didn't turn out to be a very good life
no, and that was at a
because of,
cost. And then
yeah.
in the afterlife, she had to learn that uh, that was a counterproductive way, and there are other ways, and we'd like to help you discover what they might be. And there can be a different version of you that doesn't have to be eternally um, scarred by that event. Or scarred is an interesting word because in the Christian story, Jesus's wounds still show up after Easter, but light pours through them. Um, they're they're not. He doesn't stay this powerless. He was never a powerless victim. But anyway, she had to learn another way of incorporating that dark story into a larger story that was light.
Right, right. And then the lady who couldn't get over mourning,
Yes.
her,
One of the things
same thing.
she was only in her late 20s when her husband and 2-year-old were killed. And then
Mhm.
she created the idea in her head that no one would ever want to be a guest in her home because it's this like mausoleum. It's this it's this sad place, and she's this sad thing, and that she reminds people of tragedy. And she created that in her own mind, and it had a kernel of truth to it, I suppose. But she blew that all out of
Right.
proportion and just decided that she would not go, out with coworkers after work. She would go home to a solitary life where she watched television. She called it the boob tube. And you remember that detail where she went to some craft store and took up needlepoint just so she'd been making something while she watched television because she was so ashamed that she was watching.
That's
She felt like if she had
Yeah.
some point at the end of it that she could legitimize the fact that she's spent hours watching television. Well, fortunately, these
Right.
stories do have happy
Right.
endings.
Yeah, and I've really seen that as I've seen people stay in the grief mode a very long time, and do exactly what she did.
Well, yes, and sometimes people are encouraged after the tragic death of a loved one or any death of a loved one that you never get over it. Well,
Mhm.
I don't have a spouse who will die or children who will die, but I have loved ones, and many of my loved ones have died, and
Mhm.
uh, I will get over it. I don't,
Right.
and I just am stubborn about Good Friday turning into Easter morning. You know, whatever the worst that comes to the worst, are at the heart of our Christian story is, hang on, it won't be long.
Right. That's right. Looking for the peace and the hope and the joy. But you incorporate it. It
You do.
becomes part of your existence, and you can remember the best, but you have to keep looking for more life.
When someone has loved us deeply and we feel the pain of their loss, we can say, thank you for teaching me how to love. I know how to love because you loved me. Uh, and and I will still love you however I can in this time and space, wherever you are. But there are other people who need my love, and I need to be aware of them and attentive to them, and even seek
Right.
them out.
And if you look around, you'll find that spirit or God or whatever you believe in will send you more love.
In the third book, the principle that we used in choosing the stories was we used the subtitle, Please Let Me Explain. We just used stories that we felt were very explanatory in whatever way they moved.
Mhm.
We didn't have one particular resolution that we were looking for. There's sometimes when we finish uh, a session, and those are mostly done on Zoom, and we'll finish one and we get to the end of it and hit the button because I get them transcribed. And then we're looking at each other like you and I are right now, and we go, wow. Oof. Well, and then sometimes we say, I would have never thought that. We learn something about how the afterlife can operate, and somebody's story opens up a new window for us. So we looked for stories that we felt like had that quality.
Just kind of wrapping up as you're going into your next year of the Joyful Friar and next year of the work that you're doing, what do you see on the horizon of the work that you're doing, or what's coming up for you?
Well, one thing I'm excited about is I like doing live in-person events. And I've been a campus minister most of my career, and retreats, like weekend retreats, are very much a part of a campus ministry program. And exit interviews at graduation, when people look back upon their years, when they look back and say how the campus ministry affected their life, they almost always refer either to service projects, including like international ones, or that bring you out of your world into somebody else's, or retreats where you went away for just one weekend, but you talked truth at a level of depth that's uncommon. I love doing retreat work, and there's a church here in Tucson. It's called Most Holy Trinity, where I often help out. I'm not on the staff, but I help there. They're bringing me in and allowing me to be with them for 5 days to do a retreat on Afterlife Interrupted. So I'm writing it with one of my prayer partners, Michael Quinn, and we're thinking of it as the template that we might bring other places, and not necessarily Roman Catholic ones, but anywhere that a group of people would commit the time and want to do it. So that's coming up. Well, this program is going to air in early October, and that retreat is going to be at the end of October. You might know that Catholic people dedicate the month of November to praying for those who have died.
Wonderful.
And
Oh,
so
that sounds very exciting. I think that you will find if you open up those retreats that you'll have quite a bit of response to that.
I hope so. And
Mhm.
I'm also excited that I'm getting to go to Branson, Missouri.
My favorite place.
Is it? Well, why don't you come and
Well, I don't
visit?
know if it's my favorite, but it's cool.
They've invited the pastor of the Catholic Church in Branson has invited me to do a Toto-based retreat, a Wizard of Oz one, the weekend before Thanksgiving, because on Thanksgiving Day, the movie Wicked opens in theaters.
Premiering. Yeah.
So it's going to be the Oz story is going to be topical again because there's going to be a big media blitz in advance of the premiere of that film. So I said, let's do the Wizard of Oz material. And Catholic folk, our liturgical year, the Christian churches that use a liturgical calendar, um, it concludes in late November and starts with Advent, which is usually around December 1st. So for people that are in that cycle of it's already about endings and beginnings, and it kind of follows the calendar. You know, the harvest time
Mhm.
and the ground going fallow, and uh, you know, death to new life in the spring. Easter comes, when the things are
Right.
sprouting again. So we're looking at
Right.
the movie with that in mind, with endings and beginnings.
Oh, that sounds like you got a lot of exciting things coming up this year.
Yes, that's just the
Yeah.
couple. There's larger ones that I don't want to go into just right now, but those two are uh, uh, top of mind because they involve material that I need to put in form.
Mhm.
And always that stuff needs to be publicized, so you need to be able to. You can't be doing it till the last minute,
Yeah.
which is really my
The
style.
devil's in the details.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Okay, well, I've kind of finished up. Is there anything more that you'd like to say about just the
I
work
wanted
that you're
you to,
doing?
well, I wanted you to get in a plug about the meditation that you have that involves the Lord's Prayer.
Okay. Well, I'll talk a little bit about my work. I have my website is Supernal, Supernal Living.com. And I've been writing that blog site for 14 years. But about 5 years ago, I had a client. I'm also a Reiki healer, and I've been involved in healing prayer before I found Reiki, but it all comes together. It's all there, you know. And she asked me, would I show her how to do what I do? And I said, well, I don't know, but how about if I do uh, a meditation for you and you can listen to it and see how that works? And so I was led to, and I actually, my uh, mentor, it said, oh, you should see how wonderful it is to use the Lord's Prayer and open up the energy parts of that we call chakras. So that just melded together, opening chakras with the Lord's Prayer. And that was my first meditation. I've done, I don't know, 35 or something that are on my website and on YouTube. And so, you know how in most um, the old religious store paintings where they have the halo,
Yes.
yes, and so all that, and that's the first that, you know, we start out, our Father who art in heaven, and we picture that beautiful light like a halo
Mhm.
coming and opening upon us, and then it just keeps on going. So that particular meditation is always available at supernalliving.com and many others. So if you want to come and visit, I feel like there's lots to read there, but the meditations I'm doing now feel like an act of co-creation with spirit, and it's something I really enjoy.
Good. I enjoy that too.
I have really feel privileged to have been asked to be the guest host for this auspicious occasion. And we thank everybody who has watched us throughout this entire podcast, even with our little blips of communication that makes it very real. Be sure to check out the rest of Father Nathan's podcasts that are always available, both online, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to Joyful Friar.
Yeah.
And until next time, this is Dana Taylor. Thank you. And Father Nathan Castle.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless. Bye.
I love the Joyful Friar podcast, and I look so forward to Tuesdays.
Happy second anniversary to the Joyful Friar Podcast. It is a joy to be here. I'm the illustrator of some of his books. My name is Stefan Salinas. And again, thank you so much, Father, for making a difference in our lives.
Hi, Father Nathan. I want to wish you a wonderful second anniversary on your podcast. I can't even tell you how much joy and meaning and peace it brings to me, and I know so many others in the world. I'm so grateful for you and Chantel and the work you guys do together to make this podcast happen. Thank you so much.
I've listened to podcasts for like the past 10 years. I listen to them every single day. Nathan has had the best speakers that I've ever heard. And his podcasts are so good that I just can't recommend it enough. So congratulations, both of you, Chantel and Nathan, and keep up the good work.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.